We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today, Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, as the state legislature comes back into session on Monday, June 1st, to figure out what they're going to do about the state budget, both to figure out the rest of this year's budget and the budget that starts on July 1st. For several years, the state's had a very popular sales tax-free weekend that's helped people buy things for like computers and clothes, other things that children need when they go back to school. Is that likely to be another victim of the budget cuts coming up between now and the end of June?
That very well could be. That could be one of the things on the chopping block. It's about 8 to 10 million for the weekend.
While we're talking about education, we've had the University of Tennessee announce sort of a different way to go to school. They're going to start back maybe a little bit early, go all the way through Thanksgiving, finish exams, and come back perhaps later in the year. MTSU here in Middle Tennessee is talking about starting on campus and, as far as I know, not making any other changes. With that kind of differences going on in higher education, does that appear that things are still a little bit iffy for the fall and for next year for schools in Tennessee?
Well, I hope they're not. I hope we have both higher ed as well as K through 12 able to come back without any risk to the children or the teachers. And I'm hopeful that will happen. One never knows.
You and Speaker Sexton, Karen Sexton, seem to disagree a little bit about the focus of this session of the General Assembly. You want to just focus on budget-related issues, COVID-19 things. Speaker Sexton wants to take up many of the bills, some controversial ones that were going to be coming up and brought up by the Republican supermajority before, and try to get them passed. Are y'all going to come to an agreement about what you're going to actually try to do?
We will. Speaker Sexton and I are good friends, and we'll work things out. We've got a good leadership team in the Senate with Senator Yeager, Chairman Watson, Chairman Yeager, and Leader Johnson, and he's got a good team on his side. But we'll get together and work things out. We always have.
When the House committees were here during most of the week, they went through some 400 bills. They had that much of a backlog. A number of the controversial bills were moved forward. Are they kind of calling your bluff on some of this, and maybe they will go ahead and try to pass them and send them to you?
Well, the bill has to pass both houses, so
yes, sir.
We'll see what happens.
You feel like you've got your people behind you on this. I mean, in other words, if it comes to a standoff, you're not worried that they're going to look around and suddenly the members of the Senate are starting to pass it through committees that you didn't expect to have happen on your side.
Well, I think all of the chairmen realize the seriousness of the situation that we're in, and I think they'll be very judicious in going forward and very thoughtful. And I don't think we'll pass anything that costs money, and might pass a few things that maybe are able to increase revenues without really increasing taxes.
What might that be, Lieutenant Governor? What things are you thinking about doing that would give the state more revenue but not necessarily be considered a tax increase?
Well, currently businesses outside the state of Tennessee do not have to collect sales tax if their total sales are under 500,000, and we could lower that threshold and collect additional money and still survive any court challenge, because what they've used in the past is it would be a burden on them to have to collect the money. The taxes are due, and actually, if it is not the business that collects it from out of state, then it's a person's responsibility to pay it. But very few people do, and there's it's hard to figure out which businesses are collecting and which aren't.
Unemployment.
Go ahead.
Well, unemployment in Tennessee is at 15%. Some people are saying it might go as high as 20% for a while. You're already using some of the federal funds, right, in order to take care of that, because there was some concern at one point that your trust fund that helps pay out the unemployment compensation might be going broke.
Well, we have different triggers, and the first trigger is enacted if it goes below $1 billion. And right now, we're above that. And our intent is to keep above it, where we don't have to enact any of those triggers. Once those triggers are pulled, the rates on all businesses would go up. And we feel that that would be a bad thing to do given the times that we're in and the suffering that business and companies have had throughout Tennessee.
Speaking of companies in Tennessee, some business groups want the state to provide some kind of legal protections from lawsuits coming from their employees or from customers if businesses reopen, but they're still following the rules that are set out by the CDC and by the governor or the local counties. Is that a bill you would consider to include and pass in the House this time and the Senate to get that on the books?
Well, I think that's something that we would pass. And I think it would only be for the period during the COVID epidemic. And as long as the business is following the CDC guidelines and the state guidelines, there would not be a cause of action to sue if somebody came down with COVID pneumonia.
There have been a lot of complaints about the Department of Labor in the state. They've certainly had a very difficult time, unprecedented for a number of people asking for help. Do you think the department's done the best job it could given the circumstances, or do you see some changes needed to make sure the department's ready to handle this in the future?
I think we're increasing the staff, and I think that because this came on so quickly and the calls started coming in for benefits, I think that was an issue, but I think the staff is geared up now, and they've brought additional equipment in, and I think they'll be able to handle it.
Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally is our guest on Inside Politics. Our conversation continues with him on the other side of this break. Stay with us.